President Yoon is headed to Tokyo today for a face-to-face summit with the Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida this afternoon. The two-day trip is aimed at opening a so-called new era to the long, bitter Seoul-Tokyo relations. And with a security cooperation expected to top Thursday's summit talks, North Korea displays unhappiness ahead of the summit, firing yet another ballistic missile into the East Sea this morning. Fears in the banking industry are mounting again, this time in Switzerland. Shares in Credit Suisse sank to a record low on Wednesday, prompting Swiss regulators to roll up their sleeves to help the troubled banking giant. President Yoon jets off for Japan today for a face-to-face summit with Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida this afternoon. The two-day trip is aimed at opening a so-called new era to end the long-standing bitter Seoul-Tokyo relations. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon is in Tokyo ahead of the summit. Do-yeon, describe the scenes there at the moment, please.
Right, Tommy, good morning. I may be at another country, but I'm in the same time zone as you are, right? That's just how close the two capitals are. 2 hours of flight away from each other, but the two haven't enjoyed the best of relations recently. But I'm standing right in front of Yoon-Kishida's office, and as you can see behind me, from the South Korean flags hanging on the streets, not long from now, a sitting South Korean president will visit Japan for the first time in 12 years to have a summit with his Japanese counterpart. Now, this comes not long after Seoul announced a solution to the core issue behind frosty relations behind the neighbors, the compensation plan for South Korean victims of Japan's forced labor during World War II, in an attempt to resume positive diplomatic relations with Japan. Now, President Yoon has been making the front pages of local newspapers as Japan prepares to host Yoon. Take a listen to what the South Korean National Security Advisor to the president had to say about the visit a couple days ago.
This visit to Japan by Yoon will be the end to the vicious cycle between the two countries and a foundation to resume real diplomacy. The two will discuss issues on all fronts, including what comes after Seoul's compensation proposal for forced wartime labor victims. And there will be exchanges of opinions on a variety of issues.
Right, lots of issues on the summit table. Now, Do-yeon, walk us through the president's schedule in Tokyo. What's in store for him?
Tommy, he hasn't departed Seoul yet, but he's soon to land here around lunch. While an official from the presidential office has said there won't be a joint statement from the two countries, as this is just the beginning of normalizing the relations, there will be a joint press conference. But first, as he lands, he will meet with Korean nationals for lunch. Then he's going straight to the summit with his counterpart Yoon-Kishida, which will be followed by the mentioned joint press briefing. A state dinner will be hosted by the Japanese Prime Minister later today as well. For tomorrow, Yoon will be meeting with business leaders to expand economic ties with Tokyo. Before he leaves, as Yoon tends to do for all overseas trips, he will also stop by at a local university. And also keep in mind, First Lady Kim Gun-hee will be joining President Yoon on this trip and will be meeting Yoon-Kishida, the wife of Japanese Prime Minister. Now, that's all I have for now. Back to you, Dami.
All right, Do-yeon, thank you for the report, and do keep us updated throughout the day. Now, ahead of the Yoon-Kishida summit this afternoon, North Korea has fired yet another ballistic missile into the East Sea this morning. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff says it detected a long-range ballistic missile fired from Pyongyang's Sunan area at around 7:10 a.m. Thursday's launch appears to be the regime's show of unhappiness over the summit, which will include talks on security cooperation. The North has been on a provocative roll this week, staging a series of missile launches, also in a protest against the ongoing Freedom Shield military drills between Seoul and Washington this week. We'll bring you more details on this developing situation in our later newscast. Defense chiefs of the U.S. and Russia have resumed their talks over Russian fighter jets are allegedly taking down a U.S. drone in the Black Sea on Tuesday. And a race is underway to recover the American drone. Our Lee Sing-ja has the details.
hoping to prevent any further escalation of tensions between Washington and Moscow after a Russian jet allegedly caused an American spy drone to crash over the Black Sea on Tuesday. The defense chiefs of U.S. and Russia held phone talks on Wednesday. The phone call marked the first of its kind between Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Defense Secretary Sergei Shoigu since October 2022 and was initiated by the U.S. After the phone call, Austin held a Pentagon press briefing where he stressed that it's important that great powers be models of transparency and communication. However, he also added that the United States will continue to fly and to operate wherever international law allows, explaining that the drone was flying over the Black Sea in accordance with international law. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says relations between the two countries are at their lowest point, as it expressed regret over the collision between the American drone and the Russian fighter jet over the Black Sea. However, according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Wednesday, the United States ignored flight restrictions set by Russia in the Black Sea and warned that it will not allow any further invasion of its territorial waters. Still, Peskov insisted that the two sides will continue to hold constructive dialogue in order to avoid further raising tensions between the two countries. Moscow also said Wednesday that it would continue to try to retrieve the MQ-9 Reaper drone that crashed into the Black Sea. Washington says it's also searching for the drone, but noted that it's taken mitigating measures to ensure there was nothing of value on the downed drone in case Russia gets to it first. 이승재, Arirang News.
Fears in the banking industry are mounting again, this time in Switzerland. Shares in Credit Suisse sank to a record low on Wednesday, prompting Swiss regulators to roll up their sleeves to help the troubled banking giant. Our Lee Si-hoo reports.
Swiss regulators said Credit Suisse can access liquidity from the central bank if needed, calming fears around the nation's flagship bank after its shares plunged as much as 30% on Wednesday. In a joint statement, the Swiss financial regulator FINMA and the nation's central bank, the Swiss National Bank, said that Credit Suisse meets the liquidity requirements imposed on systematically important banks. The statement also said that the problems of certain banks in the USA do not pose a direct risk of contagion for the Swiss financial markets, alluding to the collapse of US-based Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. But experts say that risk in the banking sector is being reassessed following the collapse of those banks last week.
And there's sort of contagion, not because they had any connection with Credit Suisse, but because investor sentiment changed and people were scrutinizing other banks more carefully, and Credit Suisse is seen as the weakest link, if you like.
According to CNN, over the few years, Credit Suisse has experienced a series of missteps and compliance failures that have damaged its reputation. In fact, customers pulled out 123 billion Swiss francs, or around $133 billion from the bank in 2022 alone. And also last year, it reported an annual net loss of nearly 7.3 billion Swiss francs or $7.9 billion, its biggest loss since the global financial crisis in 2008. Wednesday's drop in share price came after the Saudi National Bank, Credit Suisse's largest shareholder, said it would not buy more shares on regulatory grounds. The European banking index fell by 7%. U.S. stocks also suffered losses, with the S&P 500 losing 0.70% and the Dow Jones Industrial Average falling 0.87%. Meanwhile, the price of some other assets climbed.
Like gold is up, the dollar is up, Bitcoin and crypto are marginally up, because I think people are running to safe haven assets.
Meanwhile, according to a Bloomberg report, the U.S. Treasury Department is working closely with the Federal Reserve and European regulators to review the U.S. financial sector's exposure to Credit Suisse. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In response to criticism that subsidy conditions in the chip sector are excessive for overseas companies, Washington says conditions are applied equally across the board. Speaking at a press briefing on Wednesday, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, Ramin Tului, says a number of companies, including South Korea and Taiwan, are criticizing the strict conditions for companies applying for subsidies under the CHIPS Act. However, he noted that U.S. companies are subject to the same requirements. In response to South Korea's concerns that the Semiconductor Act will reduce investment in the U.S. by foreign companies, the official stressed the U.S. will remain an attractive investment destination, whether in semiconductors or clean energy. Going zero waste. It's a movement that aims to send nothing to the landfill, meaning reusing as much as we can and sending just a little to be recycled. This has become a positive trend and has settled down as a green habit, not only here in the country, but also globally. For more on this, let's turn to Ms. Evelina Lundqvist, a zero-waste business consultant. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So in Korea, people are turning to shops where we can participate in the zero-waste movement by buying necessities like shampoo and taking products in our own containers. What do you think about zero-waste movement here in the country?
I think it seems to be happening a lot in Korea at the moment. I would say even the movement is vibrant. I checked the Korea Zero Waste Movement Network has over 180 members. That's a lot. And there's a growing number of zero waste grocery stores. Almost all food waste is being collected. The overall recycling rates are very high. So there's really a lot happening. Of course, there is still a lot to do in terms of reducing the use of single-use plastics and stopping the plastic pollution on beaches and in the ocean, for example. There's a lot to do still.
Right, the movement is active, more active than ever. Now, what kind of zero waste and environmental projects or campaigns have been adopted in your community? Please introduce some of them to us.
Yeah, I live in Austria. I work mainly in Austria, in Central Europe, and there's a lot happening here as well. Of course, there's so many initiatives and also companies waking up to the fact that we need to cut waste and use other business strategies, zero waste and circular economy business strategies. There are changes, for example, to the waste collection systems to increase recycling rates, even though that's not the central part of the movement. And of course, the elephant in the room is that we need to consume less and we need to consume more services instead of products. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of initiatives around that as well.
Right. And the real question is, why do we need to adopt or even consider practicing green habits? I mean, what do we get out of it?
It is incredibly important. Basically, if we want to take it all the way, it's if we want to have a habitable planet for current and future generations, we need to mitigate climate change, we need to mitigate biodiversity loss, and we need to end plastic pollution, to mention a few of the big problems. The latest Global Circularity Gap report states that we are only 7.2% circular in the world, meaning only 7.2% of all the materials that we put into the global economy actually return in the system. So we have a lot to do. But the good news is also that there are a lot of solutions and innovations already out there that can help us in terms of shifting the way that we do business, shifting policy making towards zero waste.
Right. And for us, we can be responsible consumers. Now, as an
definitely, that's super important.
As an active environmentalist yourself, how can we become more eco-friendly in our daily lives? I mean, any tips or go-to practices of yours that you can share with us?
Yes, there's a lot that everyone can do. I think the main thing about the zero waste movement is to enjoy what you already have. We know that we need to consume less, but it's not about decreasing the quality of life, but rather enjoying what is there already and turning to sharing, to secondhand, to repairs, to rentals, to upcycling, and even living in a smaller apartment or not upgrading to a big villa. If you have that opportunity, that's a good way to go.
Right. Lots of easy tips to take on in our daily lives, just starting from becoming more responsible as consumers.
Yes, definitely. And other tips would be to shop local, unwrapped fruits and vegetables, for example, to join a food co-op, to bring your own reusable water bottle. These are all like simple examples. But another thing that you can also do is to bring the topic of zero waste to your workplace, your university, even your local library, to bring the topic in all the spaces that we need to discuss it.
Right. Let me tell you, I do have a collection of reusable bottles in my in my shelf as well. All right. Thank you.
Many of us do.
Right. Easy, but it's not too hard.
Yeah, there's so much that we can do together.
Right. All right, Evelina, thank you so much for connecting with us all the way from Austria this morning.
Thank you.
The increasing popularity of electric vehicles is nothing new, but the green move has also driven competition for better and cheaper batteries. Our Moon Hae-ryun went to check out this year's Interbattery 2023.
Last year, the total number of electric vehicles registered in South Korea rose by nearly 70% on year. The number of gasoline cars recorded just a 2% rise during the same period. In line with this trend, Korean companies are stepping up their game in not only electric vehicles, but one of their most fundamental parts, batteries. As a result, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and the Ministry of Environment are hosting the annual Interbattery and EV Trend Korea trade shows this year in Seoul for 3 days starting Wednesday. Interbattery 2023 consists of a record number of companies and booths showcasing the latest battery technologies from both home and abroad, and more than 35,000 people are expected to visit. The highlight are the booths run by Korean companies SK On, Samsung SDI, and LG Energy Solution. Combined, these companies were reported to have a market share of 23.2% in the battery industry last year. LG Energy Solutions' battery swapping station enables users to quickly switch a used battery for a fully charged one on the spot. SK On's super fast battery won the Best of Innovation Award at the 2023 Consumer Electronics Show as the fastest charging battery in the world, taking just 18 minutes to be fully charged. Samsung SDI offers a battery that uses solid electrolytes instead of liquid in order to increase the capacity of the battery, meaning that electric cars using this type of battery can run longer.
But is it really green transport if it's not sustainable? The reuse and recycling of batteries is becoming just as important as producing more efficient and cheaper batteries.
Korean companies such as Mintech work with battery and electric vehicle firms to help them reuse old batteries.
Electric vehicle batteries can be reused even after the vehicle has been scrapped because they are usually in good condition.
While the Korean government is bolstering its electric vehicle and battery production with subsidies, it seems that their next task will be to step up its efforts in battery recycling like the United States. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
We're starting in Turkey this morning. The country's quake-hit southern eastern region has now been hit by floods.
Well, that is right, Dami. At least 14 people have been killed and several are missing after 2 cities were hit by flash floods on Wednesday. Now, 12 of those killed were in the city of Şanlıurfa, while the other 2 deaths were in Adıyaman. Now, search and rescue efforts by diving teams and firefighters are still underway. The floods were caused by sudden torrential rainfall, with one area of Adıyaman province receiving 136 millimeters of rain in just 24 hours. Şanlıurfa province received a third of its annual rainfall in just 2 days. Now, rains are expected to continue until the end of the week. Among those affected by the floods are families living in containers who were displaced by the major earthquakes last month that killed 48,000 people. Shifting our attention to California now, where approximately 100,000 residents are without power and over 20,000 are under evacuation orders, following heavy flooding and ferocious winds in the state. Now, the floods come on the back of torrential rain and storms over the past week. State Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency for 43 of the state's 58 counties, as daily rainfall records were broken in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara and Santa Maria on Tuesday. And with floods set to move east, another 25 million people in the central U.S. are under threat. Other areas in California, meanwhile, have been lashed by gale force winds of up to 150 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, NASA has unveiled the prototypes of the spacesuits set to be used by moonwalkers in its upcoming lunar mission. Called the Axiom Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or AXIM-U, these suits were introduced at the Moon to Mars Festival in Texas on Wednesday local time. NASA plans to have its astronauts wear the suits during the Artemis 3 lunar mission in 2025. Compared to older models used in previous moonwalking missions, the new suits are designed for improved protection, a better range of motion, and will feature innovative equipment. They can also be adjusted to fit the wearer's dimensions. Now, the moon suit maker Axiom Space says that the final version of the suit is still in development and will eventually be colored white like its predecessor. And finally, Red Bull stunt pilot Yoon-Kishida made a bullseye landing when he set his airplane down on the helipad of Dubai's iconic Burj Al Arab building. The stunt on Tuesday was the first time ever that a winged aircraft has landed on the 27-meter wide helipad, which is 212 meters above the ground. With less than 21 meters of helipad runway available, Yoon-Kishida was able to land his short takeoff and landing aircraft on his third attempt without using visual aids. Now, the achievement comes after lengthy preparations that started in 2021 and involved over 650 practice landings in Poland, the United States and in Dubai.
Good morning. Temperatures for most of the central regions have suddenly dropped below average this morning, along with a cold wind, bringing down feels-like temperatures below zero here in Seoul. And most parts are seeing morning temperatures that are 2 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday. Sunny skies will be a feature, but Chungcheongdo, Jeollabuk-do, and Gyeongsang-Pukdo province will have bad dust levels during the first half of the day. Now, the dry advisory has been expanded to more areas, and strong wind remains on Thursday, with strong wind advisory issued for Korea's easternmost islands, Ulleungdo and Dokdo today. Now, back to today's temperatures. Afternoon highs will be 2 to 8 degrees lower this afternoon, so topping out at just 10 degrees Celsius. Gwangju and Daegu at 16 degrees this afternoon, still warmer than norms in the south. Now, this round of spring cold will be short-lived, with temperatures returning to normal tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, Jeju and the south coast will see on and off light rain tomorrow. That's Korea for you, and here's to look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.